Angie Colvin, District 5. I'm a parent and I'm with Moms for Liberty. I'm here to tell you about 4th grade Walk 2 Moons. These are quotes. My mother screamed just once, one long mournful wail, and then it was quiet. When the doctor carried the baby out of the room, I asked to see it. It had a pale bluish tinge and there were marks on its neck where the umbilical cord had strangled it. It might have been dead for hours, the doctor told my father. I asked if I could touch her. She was still a little warm from being inside my mother. I thought maybe if I held her, she would wake up. I slept beside my mother until I heard her calling my father. When he turned on the light, I saw the blood spread out across the bed. It had soaked the sheets and the blanket, and it had soaked into the white plaster of my cast. She wouldn't stop bleeding. Later, my mother said they took out all of my equipment. She would not have any more babies. The teacher's manual gives 3 separate warnings for the emotionally mature content in this book. With all of the great literature out there, why are we reading books that require this many warnings? Page 91 of the teacher's manual states the sophisticated cognitive work builds a foundation for critical thinking, including concepts related to social justice.
Kimberly Calcote, District 6, Moms for Liberty. For the 2nd grade book, Separate is Never Equal, the teacher manual states that the text is too complicated for the kids to read, so instead, the teacher is to have the kids focus on the illustrations. These illustrations include Mexican children behind fences at a pool with the sign reading, "No dogs or Mexicans allowed," eating lunch in a pasture with cows and flies, and Sylvia crying at school with white children around her. Statements from the book include, they have problems with lice, impetigo, and tuberculosis. They have generally dirty hands, face, neck, and ears. One character is asked, do you believe white students are superior to Mexicans in personal hygiene, scholastic ability, clothing, and their ability to take part in the activities at school? And the character answers yes. This story is about a remarkable family fighting for equality that they deserve, but it's being taught at an age that our children cannot fully understand the gravity of the landmark decision. This is just another lesson that is age inappropriate and does not fully balance this historical account of where we've come from to where we are now.
District 2, Moms for Liberty. This is an excerpt from the 4th grade George versus George book, page 48. Besides constantly stealing food and horses, the redcoats burned entire towns and villages, looted or seized houses, raped and murdered innocent civilians, and set fire to crops in timberland. British troops locked prisoners in filthy ships where they died from flies, starvation, heat, cold, and disease. Indians fighting alongside the British burned almost 1,000 homes, tortured and killed whole families, and scalped the dead, believing that it would make them more powerful. Some Indians honored their bravest victims by eating them. For revenge, rebel troops sent by Washington destroyed 41 native villages, many of which were peaceful, and burned all their crops and orchards. They collected scalps and showed off pairs of pants made from the skins of these dead Indians. While there are other quotes worth mentioning, it is important to note the violent images on these pages I just read, including children running out of their homes being shot, soldiers shooting Indians while females are running away with babes in arms, soldiers setting fires to a house that still has a child alive inside. Time.
Hi, good evening. Michelle Sutton, District 12. I want to talk about some 4th grade books. There's 3 different books that include cannibalism, which I think is very inappropriate for 9 and 10-year-olds. In Gifts from the Gods, the story says, quote, he invited the gods to a banquet at his house and had his own son, Pelops, cooked up and served as a meal. Nobody knows why he did such a dreadful thing, end quote. In Understanding Greek Myths, it says it might seem unusual to us, but many myths include stories of people, mainly children, who were sliced, cooked, and eaten. However, the victims were sometimes coughed up whole or rescued and put back together, as good as new. In Pushing Up the Sky, there's a play that the kids act out called The Cannibal Monster. The play says things like, run for your lives and eaten alive. This is a story about how the cannibal monster wanted to kill and eat people, but Brown Bear killed it. However, Brown Bear ignored the advice of the raven and burned the cannibal monster. From the fire, you hear, you have set me free. Now I will eat you forever. It says, quote, the smoke is turning into little creatures.
Robin Steenman, District 12. Wit and Wisdom is a failed curriculum. A lot of talk has been paid to the new Tennessee ELA standards adopted in 2018 and how that drove the selection of Wit and Wisdom over other more traditional curriculums. That would be a valid argument had Wit and Wisdom actually passed those standards. It miserably failed the first review. Those reviewers were fired and new ones hired, presumably to re-review it at a lower standard. Even so, it failed again.
And the DOE granted waivers for failed materials and created its own free supplemental material to help prop up wit and wisdom. So when we applaud great minds for replacing a book, or the curriculum department pats itself on the back for removing a text, or adding quarterly reviews, or distilling something into piecemeal PDF files, let's all remember the fundamental fact that wit and wisdom is a failed curriculum, and it has traumatized Williamson County kids. Can we all agree that Williamson County
Time.
deserves a curriculum that meets standards?
Time.
Shanna, District 9. Leadership and many on the board have failed Williamson County. You have not lived up to your duties of your positions and lost our trust and respect. If you had the best interests of the kids in mind, why would leadership choose to implement a curriculum that didn't meet Tennessee standards and failed multiple reviews and required a waiver? If you have the best interest of our kids in mind, why choose a reading curriculum that doesn't contain a phonics component? If you had the best interest of our kids in mind, why force them to read, discuss, and review curriculum that is dark and tragic with content that discusses suicide, ideation, extreme emotion, graphic death, cannibalism, divides the races, and is anti-American? If you had the best interest of our kids in mind, why did many of you refuse to sit down with parents and understand and address their concerns? If you had the best interest
Time.
of kids in mind,
Sorry, I didn't mean time. I meant.
if you had the best interest of kids in mind, why don't you conduct a more in-depth review of the curriculum and not push it through in a short time? The reason is you don't have the best interest of your kids in mind. You're pushing an agenda and you're responding to money. If you should be ashamed of this. If this is your best, resign. You failed Williamson County. Vote to not extend Golden's contract. Get rid of this curriculum and stand up for the kids and parents you choose to represent.
Our next